Our Senate family grieves today with the Byrd family over the loss of one of the most dedicated Americans ever to serve this country, one of the most devoted men ever to serve his state, one of the most distinguished senators ever to serve in the United States Senate. Robert Byrd's mind was among the greatest the world's ever seen. As a boy, he was called upon, when he was in elementary school, to stand before the class and recite not paragraphs from the assignment of the night before, but pages of the night before. He did this with memory. From his graduation as valedictorian of his high school class at the age of 16 to his death this morning as the Senate's president pro tempore at age 92, he mastered everything he touched with great thoughtfulness and skill. Mr. President, this good man could drive from his home here in Washington to West Virginia and back. That takes 8 hours. He could recite poetry for 8 hours and never recite the same poem twice. I was asked by Senator Byrd to travel to West Virginia to do an exchange with the British Parliament. And there were a number of us there, 8 or 9 senators, and a like number of British parliamentarians. And I can remember that night so well. We had the music up there, music he liked the best, his bluegrass music. And they played. It was a festive evening. And then it came time for the program. The program, Senator Byrd said, I'm going to say a few things. And he passed out little notebooks, had notebooks passed out to everyone there with a little pencil to it. You wanted to make sure everything was just right, that people, they had something to write, they had something to write on and write with. And he proceeded, standing there without a note, to pronounce the reign of the British monarchs from the beginning to the end. He would give the dates that they served, some of the more difficult spellings, he would spell the name. And he would, as I indicated, if it was something that really he wanted to talk about that they had accomplished that he thought was noteworthy, he would tell us about that. That took about an hour and a half to do that. The British parliamentarians were stunned. They had never heard anyone could do anything like that. An American talking about the reign of the British monarchs. Those of us who were senators, nothing surprised us that he could do from memory. He has, I can remember, Mr. President, that when he decided he was no longer going to be the Democratic leader, that Senator Dole did an event for him in the Russell Building, and all senators were there, Democrat and Republican senators. And he told us a number of things he didn't do. He told us a number of things he did do. For example, he read the Encyclopedia Britannica from cover to cover twice. He was bored one break. He didn't really have something he wanted to work on, so he studied the dictionary. He read that from cover to cover during one of our breaks. I've told this story on an occasion or two, but to give the depth of this man's memory, I had been to Nevada, and he asked me when I came back, "What'd you do?" I said, "Senator Byrd, I pulled a book out of my library on the way back. I didn't have anything to read. It was a paperback. And I read The Adventures of Robinson Crusoe." And as those of us who can remember him, he looked at me and held his head back a little bit and his eyes rolled back, and he said, "Robinson Crusoe." And he proceeded to tell me, I just read the book, how long he had been on that island. 28 years, 3 months, a week and 2 days, or whatever it was. I was stunned. I didn't know. I went back and pulled the book out to see if he was right, and he was right. He probably hadn't read that book in 35, 40 years, but he knew that. What a mind. It was really stunning, the man's memory. The head of the political science department, Andy Tuttle, University of Nevada at Las Vegas, taught a course, a graduate course, based on Senator Byrd's lectures on the Roman Empire. He gave 10 lectures here on the Senate floor on the Roman Empire, the fall of the Roman Empire. He gave the lecture because he was concerned because of the line item veto. And he felt that the line item veto would be the beginning of the end of the United States Senate, and he proceeded to give 10 lectures on that on the Senate floor. Every one of them from memory. Every one of them from memory. Time just perfect. They ended in 1 hour. That's how much time he had been given. Now, Mr. President, the original Roman emperors served for 1 year. He could do it from memory. He knew who they were, how long they served, knew how to spell their names. Truly an unbelievably brilliant man. He's the only person to have earned his law degree while as a member of Congress. What he accomplished is really very, very long. But his thirst for knowledge was simply without equal. Senator Byrd once observed that the longer he lived, the better he understood how precious a gift was of our time on earth. I quote Senator Byrd, "As you get older, you see time running out. It's irretrievable, it's irreversible, but one should never retire from learning and growth." That was his quote. Robert Byrd never retired from anything. He served in the Senate for more than half a century, in the House of Representatives for 6 more years, and dedicated every one of those days to strengthening the state and the nation that he loved so dearly. He never once stopped fighting for the good people of West Virginia and for the principles in our founding documents. He was forever faithful to his constituents, his Constitution, and his country. He fought for what he thought was right, and when he was wrong, he was wise enough to admit it. And he did admit it a few times. Senator Byrd's ambition was legendary. He took his oath in this chamber on January 3rd, 1959, the same day Alaska became our 49th state. He told the Charleston Gazette newspaper in that freshman year, quote, "If I live long enough, I'd like to be chairman of the Senate Appropriations Committee," end of quote. 30 years later, he was, and then lived and served for 21 more years. His legislative accomplishments are many, and those achievements fortify his incomparable legacy. But he's perhaps best known in this chamber as the foremost guardian of the Senate's complex rules, procedures, and customs. He didn't concern himself with such precision as a pastime or a mere hobby. He did so because of his unyielding respect he had for the United States Senate, a reverence the Senate always returned to him, and now to his memory. With Robert Byrd's passing, America's lost its strongest defender of its most precious traditions. It now falls to each of us to keep that flame burning. Throughout one of the longest political careers in history, no one in West Virginia ever defeated Robert Byrd in a single election. In Washington, his fellow Democrats twice elected him to lead us when we were in the majority, and once more when we were in the minority. Having seen both sides, he knew better than most that legislation is the art of compromise. Many years ago in this chamber, where he served longer than any other United States senator, Senator Byrd taught a heartfelt history lesson to guide our future. It was a lesson about both the Constitution and this institution, where he said, and I quote, "This very charter of government under which we live was created in a spirit of compromise and mutual concessions. And it is only in that spirit that a continuance of this charter of government can be prolonged and sustained." A quote from Robert C. Byrd. In his tenure, he saw partisanship and bipartisanship, war and peace, rescission, and something that we have learned to appreciate, recession. He's seen recovery. The rescissions he always fought. He didn't want anyone messing with his appropriations. His perspective and legacy are invaluable to the way we carry ourselves as United States senators. So it's instructive that the man who served the longest and saw the most concluded that we must work together as partners, not partisans, for the good of our states and our country. In 1966, Robert Byrd spoke to a meeting of incoming senators and reminded them that the United States Senate is still the anchor of the Republic. Well, Senator Byrd was the anchor of the Senate. There will never be another like Senator Byrd. He was a member of this nation's Congress for more than 25% of the time that we have existed as a country, and longer than a quarter of today's sitting senators and the President of the United States have been alive. His political career spanned countless American advances and achievements. A dozen men called the Oval Office his own, while Senator Byrd called the Capitol building his own. And he would be the first to remind you that those two branches are equal in the eyes of the Constitution. And I heard him say so many times that we work with the president, not under the president. The 9 times the people of the state sent him to the Senate and the more than 18,500 votes he cast will never be matched. Mr. President, as you and I and each of us fortunate enough to be here, has the privilege of knowing firsthand, it was an incomparable honor to serve with and learn from this giant. By virtue of his endurance, Robert Byrd knew and worked with many of the greats of the United States Senate. Because of his enduring virtue, he will be forever remembered as one of the giants.